Hi there, I'm Uncle Joel with Pen and Reel, and this is Star Wars 2020, a look back at the entire Skywalker Saga. So since we're going in order of in-universe continuity, we're starting with The Phantom Menace. So I was 13 when this movie first came out, and I remember camping out in front of the movie theater to watch it. Camping out being hanging out for several hours. Like, I didn't actually stay overnight. I didn't have to. We got our tickets in advance. But that being said, the experience was great. Went with a group of friends. We had a blast. And I remember, as a 13-year-old, I really enjoyed the movie. But I wasn't super critical back then. And in a lot of ways, I wish I could go back to that. I wish I could just turn my mind off to a degree and just enjoy movies for what they are. Because I rewatched The Phantom Menace several years later, and I just felt like it was a bad movie. So that's kind of where I am going into this movie. I have memories of once enjoying it, but my more recent memories are that it's not a good movie. But it's probably been a decade or more since I've watched it, so, how well am I even remembering the negative stuff? And so many people that hate the Disney movies look back at the prequel trilogy and rave about them. So maybe the things that I thought were bad weren't so bad. Maybe I was being a little too harsh back then. So I went into it not knowing what to expect. Yeah, leaning a little bit more towards this probably isn't great, but maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. So I started watching it, and it was worse than I thought. So much worse than I remembered. Yeah, I remember really enjoying it when I was 13, and then I remember disliking it, but having aspects of it that I enjoyed when I rewatched it. Now, honestly, it's very difficult to find things that I like. So to start with, I'm going to go through quite a few of the negatives that I can think of, and then I'm going to circle back around and talk about the few positives that I can pull out of it. Right from the beginning, the pacing's just kind of odd. It's a little bit slow, and then all of a sudden it jumps to the next scene and it's moving fast, and then it kind of slows down, and then it jumps and it's moving fast, and it's like they didn't quite know what they were trying to do with it. As a film, I felt like these pacing issues were definitely a detriment to it. And then you get into things like the pod racing sequence was definitely an issue with pacing. Good bit of action thrown in, but definitely affected the pacing and the flow of the movie as a whole. And one of the major criticisms leveled against The Force Awakens was just how much it was a copy of A New Hope. But in rewatching The Phantom Menace, I found a lot of things that felt that way to me here. For instance, when they're in the Gungan city, they're given a ship that they then have to take through the core of the planet to get to the capital, Naboo. This sequence and the way they dealt with massive underwater creatures and hiding in the dark and turning the lights of the ship off, it felt just like the Millennium Falcon cruising through the asteroid field, landing, turning the lights off, trying to hide, and then dealing with giant monsters. It felt very much the same. Okay, let's hit those same beats. Let's do that same thing. It's just underwater now, so it's different. And then similarly, the original Star Wars ends with them focusing on attacking and blowing up the Death Star. And then The Phantom Menace ends with them attacking and blowing up this space station, which has kind of a globe shape in the middle in order to deactivate all of the droids. Again, it follows the same basic beats. Those story beats aside, the movie itself, the story it's trying to tell, I just found very boring. The Trade Federation is extremely uninteresting. So much of the movie centers around the Gungans versus the Trade Federation, and Naboo versus the Trade Federation. But none of that felt very compelling, and even more significant, it felt completely irrelevant to the overarching plot of the Skywalker Saga. Okay, even ignoring 7, 8, and 9, even ignoring Rogue One and Solo, if you look just at the original movies, the original trilogy, and then you add in Phantom Menace, the vast majority of it felt irrelevant. Okay, so you've got Emperor Palpatine, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin, R2-D2, C-3PO. You have things that are recurring. You have characters that are coming back. And yes, you are setting things up for the future. But the majority of the film, with the Gungans and Naboo and the Trade Federation, it does not matter. Now, it could be said that this is showing Palpatine setting up and preparing for his manipulations in order to take over and create the Empire to come. And yes, that is what's happening. But his entire purpose was misdirection. Look at this thing that doesn't ultimately matter. The viewer should not feel that manipulation. Now, maybe you could say, okay, that's good filmmaking in that he was manipulating things to get you to focus on things that don't matter, and the viewer focused on things that don't matter, and so they were being manipulated as well. But in the long run, I still am focused on watching something that doesn't matter. There are other ways that this story could be told that doesn't spend the vast majority of the movie focusing on events that are not going to be relevant for the rest of the series. You know, if you picked out the stuff with Anakin and the stuff with Palpatine, and you left out all of the Naboo stuff that doesn't matter to the overarching story, you know, you'd have maybe like 20 or 30 minutes. So with those 20 and 30 minutes, I feel like they would have been far better serviced if they took much of Attack of the Clones brought into the first movie. So you have the introduction of Anakin and of Palpatine and the events of Attack of the Clones, and then the second movie could be a deep dive into the Clone Wars. But as it is, I can't let go of the fact that most of The Phantom Menace feels irrelevant. And one of the things that frustrated me so much with this movie is that so much of the acting was just bad. Like, you had great actors that just were flat presentation, emotionless, bland, robotic. And then you had other characters like the droids and the Gungans and the Trade Federation that were like caricatures. You know, a lot of people say the Trade Federation guys in specific are even racist caricatures, which I can definitely see.
Yes, my lord. As you wish.
So you have like bland, flat, uninteresting acting.
Their nature to make us wait this long?
No, I sense an unusual amount of fear for something as trivial as this trade dispute.
And just over-the-top, ridiculous caricatures.
What is going on down there?
We lost the transmission, sir.
They are still coming through.
This is impossible!
And there's virtually no just solid acting in the movie as a whole. I can't think of a single character that I liked their acting, other than Darth Maul, who barely said a word, Darth Sidious, because he played it over the top and just leaned into it and made it over the top in such a great way.
Viceroy, I don't want this stunted slime in my sight again.
In an entertaining way. Like, he loved playing this maniacal, dark character. But then if you take all of those sequences with Darth Maul's decent acting and Darth Sidious, you've got a couple minutes maybe of screen time. The battle droids are just agonizingly stupid. It's like they went with the lowest bidder and hired the most uneducated employees to be their army, and yet it's supposed to be these highly sophisticated military droids. And okay, fine, maybe they did hire the lowest bidder, and they got these military droids that are marketed as high-end, but really are shoddy and, you know, not worth the money. Even so, their personalities, the way they talk and interact, it feels programmed to be dumb.
Coruscant, that doesn't compute. Wait, you're under arrest.
And that's where I have the difficulty with the suspension of disbelief. Making Jar Jar dumb, I can accept. He's a living being with sentience. Sure, he can be dumb. If you made all of the Gungans dumb, I would accept that. That would be fine. That would make sense. Making programmed droids talk like idiots makes no sense to me. And I just can't get past that. Just so much of the writing is just really bad, especially the dialogue. There are infamous scenes throughout the prequel trilogy that highlight the bad dialogue, so I don't need to go too far into this. But really, I don't see need to say anything more other than Anakin's first line in the movie.
Are you an angel?
What?
An angel. I heard the deep space pilots talk about them. They're the most beautiful creatures in the universe. They live on the moons of Viego, I think.
One of the major problems that I have is the depiction of Anakin as this sort of Jedi Jesus. Like, having him conceived by the Force really didn't feel necessary to me. They could have had him have a regular birth, and I feel like it would have been the same character. For me, this felt like a contrived way of trying to say, hey, look, this character's special. Don't you think he's special? But, okay. Leaving that aside, I can give them that one. There are ways that they could have developed that to make it very interesting. They didn't really do that, but they could have. And so, okay, I'll give a pass on that one. But Anakin's progression throughout the entire movie was very agonizing for me. There's so many things that just played out right. Okay, he's never finished a pod race before, but then all of a sudden he wins this pod race, that all of the stakes and everything is riding on this race, and it's pretty convenient. But then there are things like, okay, he gets in the starfighter and is like, oh, what's this switch do? Oops, I activated the ship. Okay, what's this ship do? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, oh, there, now I can shoot the droids. And, oh, hey, autopilot is taking me to the battle. Oops. Okay, well, while I'm here, I'm going to save the day. There are so many ways that he just stumbles into saving the day and having everything happen properly. Now, it could be said that the Force is working in and through him and around him to manipulate events and propel him into the future, which I could maybe accept, but honestly, it just sounds like making an excuse for a poorly written plot. Now, if you wanted to go that route of highlighting the Force is manipulating things and moving events along in this manner, then you could totally do so. But rather than have Anakin, I'm just going to flip random switches and it just happens to be everything that is needed for me to go save the day, have him get in there and have I have no clue what to do. I need to do something. And then a strange sense of calm overwhelms him and the Force moves on him and is like, that, I should flip that switch. And yeah, okay, the ship starts lifting up and moving. Have it be more of this mystical intuition that overcomes him rather than I'm a bumbling idiot who just happens to bumble in the right way that saves the world or saves the galaxy or whatever. It just doesn't work for me. But it could. It could have worked. But the way that Lucas did it, it just doesn't. Similarly, there are a number of points throughout the movie that felt like, hey, here's a checklist of things that we need to do. So let me see. They went back to Anakin's house. So, hey, let's have him introduce C-3PO. Just yep, check that off. And it really felt more like a bullet point story progression rather than something flowing naturally. And a lot of that might go to the directing and the acting. That scene where they're in Anakin's house and he introduces C-3PO. Maybe if the acting was a bit better, it could have felt natural. Hey, here's a kid, he has people over, he wants to show off his stuff. Awesome, right? Yeah, it could have felt like that. As it was I should show you my robot. Here's my robot. There we go. Move on with the plot. And coming back to the Gungans, I just could not stand them. Yeah, okay, everybody hates Jar Jar. I hate Jar Jar. I can actually forgive Jar Jar. I don't like him. I wish he never existed, but they made him to be the comic relief, and they were especially targeting kids with Jar Jar. So although he's a very ill-conceived notion, I can forgive him a little bit for that reason. I do think that you don't have to dumb things down and make just these ridiculous, stupid characters in order to appeal to children, which you can totally highlight with shows like Steven Universe or Adventure Time or even the Clone Wars animated series. So yeah, I give the basest of passes for Jar Jar, as much as I dislike him. But the Gungans, I would lump in with the battle droids, in that they just seem very ill-conceived. And honestly, it felt more like, hey, let's make these backwards, uneducated natives, which are more like hillbilly alien hybrid things, who battle with these very rudimentary weaponry against an invading droid army. And both the droids and the Gungans very much felt like they were intended for children without fully understanding what children like and what makes good characters. Again, we could look at the Clone Wars animated series, where, yes, it's written for children, but it's all ages and it works. And you don't have these dumbed down characters that really drag things down. In a lot of ways, The Phantom Menace did not feel like a movie intended for all ages. It felt like a movie intended for kids, made by someone who doesn't understand what kids like. Now, that's not entirely fair. I remember my younger brother watched this movie several times a day, every day, for weeks, maybe even months. So clearly he did something right in regards to kids, but in regards to making a solid movie, no. No, I definitely failed in regards to the Gungans and the battle droids and the plot and the character development, the dialogue, and everything. And since the Gungans and the battle droids just feel more goofy, I didn't really get the threat of the battle droids. I didn't really get the sense of desperation from the Gungans. Like, there was no weight to the coming battle. And so the battle that we got, there was no tension. There was no sense of consequence for what's to come. It should have been this big, climactic, exciting battle, but for me, it just feels really lackluster. Some interesting things happen in it. Like, I like seeing the Gungan weaponry affect the droid army and stuff like that, but interesting sequences within a battle don't make a battle compelling. There needs to be weight, there needs to be gravity to the situation, and there just wasn't. Overall, I felt like this movie added a few things to the mythos, particularly Anakin being the chosen one who's supposed to bring balance to the Force and having it be this more mystical thing where he was born of a virgin birth, and also showing the evil machinations of Palpatine and bringing Obi-Wan in and developing him as a character beyond what we got in, half of A New Hope. But as I mentioned earlier, there wasn't a lot that really added to the mythos and really added to the story, to the overall story of the Skywalker Saga. So I feel like it could have been done significantly better in pretty much every way. And what little it added, I feel doesn't justify this movie as a whole. So yeah, this movie as a whole does not feel significantly relevant to the rest of the series. The few things that they added to the mythos could have been scrunched into episode 2, or as I mentioned earlier, make episode 2 episode 1 with just a bit more of those core elements from episode 1, and then develop episode 2 as more of delving into the depths of the Clone Wars. But as it is, Phantom Menace did a poor job, particularly in light of the overarching saga. So, the things I did like about the movie is honestly a very short list. So I really appreciated Darth Maul and the Duel of the Fates, even though he didn't really do much beyond stand around and be menacing and attack. That being said, the fact that he has drawn so many people's interest with so little that he actually does, I think really showcases just how great of a character he really is. I love Duel of the Fates. It's a great song. And then one problem that I have with a lot of modern action movies, and later Star Wars movies very much fall into this category, is so many of the fight scenes take place with the camera like right in their faces. And so like, okay, yeah, they're swinging the lightsabers, but you see the camera right here, so you see their face, and occasionally see the lightsaber swing past their face. And it's supposed to like make you feel more immersion and make you feel like you're in the battle. But it's so much that I don't feel like you actually see the battle. Whereas with the Phantom Menace, had excellently choreographed fight scenes between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Darth Maul. The rest of the movie aside, the lightsaber fight scenes here are probably the best in the entire series so far, simply because we can see the entire thing and it's well choreographed. And there are scenes in later movies, like there's particularly like the throne room scene in The Last Jedi that is really entertaining, really fun to watch. But even then, there are a lot of close-ups that are supposed to draw you in, but for me, push me out. So The Phantom Menace excelled in that area. As a whole, the movie was well edited. It had a decent story structure, so I can't like critique it for like failing to have a beginning, a middle, and end, and developing the story in a natural way like that. So just like the basics of storytelling and of filmmaking, it does all right, and it's not bad in that regard. But in pretty much every other way, I just can't stand this movie. I honestly had to take a break halfway through and do other things because it was difficult to watch straight through. I don't know that I will ever want to watch this movie again unless I do something like this again in the future, or hopefully my future children get into Star Wars and want to watch it. I will accept rewatching this movie if it's to get my kids into Star Wars. So yeah, I know this video is very harsh, but I am trying to be honest and critical. I know I said that I would try to step back and just enjoy a movie for what it is, but with this one, I found it very difficult to do that. So yeah, there you have it. That's it for the first episode of Pen and Reel's Star Wars 2020, a look back at the Skywalker Saga. I hope you join us next time when we watch Attack of the Clones. Until then, it's Uncle Joel saying, stay tangible.